the answer to the question is like, oh, how did you come to write Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles? And it's because Paul Hogan and Paramount Pictures correctly answered this question. You want to pay us how much? I said this all the time. Listen, kids, if you're going to sell out big. And
right, no half measures on that.
Bought me a big house. God bless Croc 3.
Yeah.
I was like, we're not doing that. And they're like, whoa, how much do they want to pay us? Oh, we'll do that. 1,000%. 1,000%. If you're going to sell out big.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Connor Rogers, sellout Matthew Berry, Lawrence Jackson in the house.
I know, Lawrence, you agree with that, right? You have young kids. Have you taught them? Like, if you're going to
totally
sell out,
agree.
I'm not saying you should sell out. I'm just saying that if you do decide to sell out big.
Go all the way.
Go all the way. Like, don't half-ass that. Like, if you're going to say.
If that's what you must do.
Right.
Yes.
1,000%. Yeah, exactly.
I think everybody's on your side on this one. Very rare, but.
If they knew, Connor, if America knew how much money, and it's a ridiculous amount, how much money my writing partner and I made to write Crocodile Dundee 3. The movie came out over 20 years ago. Over 20 years ago. It came out, I believe, in 2001. Okay? I'll tell you this much. I literally, like 2 weeks ago, got a residual check from the Writers Guild of America or the Producers Guild. I got a residual check. It's like $500. I mean, like, just out of the blue, well, I mean, like, whatever, over 2.5 decades later.
It's money
like,
dropped from the sky.
Exactly.
Literally a care package.
So my point is that, you know, there's some gigs you do because you love it, and there's some money gigs. That was a money gig. And,
That's
you know, God bless.
I was
bought me my first house.
I gotta find me one of these money gigs
I'm
out
just-
there. Just something.
What
just to-
sequel? You actually have a chance with this Eddie Murphy look continuing to roll on.
I gotta be an actor. Stunt double for
Remake.
Eddie Murphy
Remake?
and Coming to America Part 3.
I'm going to get you a money gig. You know what I'm going to do? After the show, I'm going to talk to people at NBC. We're going to start paying you for this show. That's what we're going to start doing. You know what? That's
what I'm saying.
Now we're
Your
talking.
internship is over. Your internship is over.
Can you?
Alexa, we got to pay Lawrence now.
Can you throw in like a couple of guest spots on one of these Peacock TV show, one of these TV
let's not get
series?
crazy.
I'm trying. No, I'm
Let's not
trying.
get crazy.
Like you said, if you're gonna do it,
Yeah,
do it big.
yeah.
I want to do it big. Damn it.
Wait. So selling out is being on this show?
Slightly.
That's how you just kind of walked into that.
Kind of already hit today. Respect. An honest man. We have a lot today.
Hashtag respect, though.
Yes. Start sit day.
You remember that?
I do.
I mean, we had a crazy headline topic for start sit day, but we're going to talk about if it's time to bench Patrick Mahomes. So you don't want to go anywhere. We're going to get into that during Keep It Open or Close It Out. We're going to talk Nico Collins, potential overall wide receiver 1. And to close out the show for our best bets, we got early line alert, the lines that we really like halfway through the week for betting. Let's jump right into it, fellas. Keep it open or close it out. Listen, there's no way around it. It's been a tough go for Patrick Mahomes. It's been a tough go for him this year from a fantasy perspective. Obviously, the Chiefs are still a powerhouse in the NFL. We got to hear from Mahomes already on cleaning up this offense.
I mean, we scored 17 and we scored the 20s these last few weeks, and I feel like it's just a play here and there. It's the interception I throw to Travis, I put on his body, that gets a drive going. It's we have a fumble in the red zone on the first drive where we got some momentum going, and in this league, if you're scoring upper 20s to lower 30s, that's good football, that's good offense, and so we're close. I mean, Coach Reed's saying we keep preaching it. I know some Chiefs fans are probably annoyed by it, but that's all you can do in this league is keep pushing and pushing to get better, and I think it's going to pay off in the end.
Under 17 points in every game this season for Patrick Mahomes so far, Matthew.
By the way, 9 straight, dating back to last year, 9 straight games of under 17 fantasy points as well. By the way, he's 17th in pass attempts per game. He's been under 30 attempts in 3 out of 4 games. There's a couple of issues here. Number one is their defense is really good. So they're not getting into shootouts because they don't need to. You know, they're in these competitive games and they want to be balanced on offense despite the fact that they lost Pacheco. Some of that was because they had Pacheco, and now still they're balanced on offense. But this is the most insane thing I'm ever going to say. But like, my question to you, to anyone that has Patrick Mahomes on their roster, and I have him in a bunch of leagues, but is there still upside to Patrick Mahomes? And I know that sounds insane because he's you can make a strong argument he's the greatest quarterback to ever play. He's certainly the best in the game today, right? And he's got 3 titles, and he's, what is he, 26?
You need one win, you're taking Patrick Mahomes every time.
1,000%, right? And if you threw all the players back into the pool in the actual NFL, and you said, okay, there's a draft, Mahomes goes number 1 overall in the actual NFL draft. All of that said, over his last 15 games, Patrick Mahomes has 1 top 10 finish. He was QB8 in week 12 of last year. 1 top 10 finish in his last 15 games. Here's some quarterbacks in the NFL that have more top 10 finishes over the last 15 games dating back to last year. Joe Flacco has 4 of them. Jake Browning has 5 of them. Whew. Tyrod Taylor has 2 of them. Daniel Jones has 3 of them. Patrick Mahomes over the last 15 games has the same number of top 10 weekly finishes as Tommy DeVito.
Oh, boy.
They each have 1. Him and Tommy Cutlets are tied with 1 top 10 weekly finish over the last 15 games. And I specifically, you see it, you just see it there. He's QB 17 on the season. He's averaging 14.4 fantasy points per game. He's going to make the hate list this week, guys, and everyone's going to be like, what? But you look at this matchup against the Saints, who allowed only 1 passing touchdown in 4 games this year. They've allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. I don't know who he's throwing to. Yes, he's got Travis Kelce, but if you're the Saints, you're like, we'll take our chances with, Mecole Hardman and Justin Watson and, Xavier Worthy. They'll take a couple of shots to Xavier Worthy, but this is an offense. If I'm Andy Reid, I'm just like, we've got to play good defense and try to control the clock.
Right.
And by the way, and that's what teams are doing too, is we're not giving up the overneath stuff. We're going to play too deep, and we're going to, and so it's a function of both the offense, the surrounding players around Mahomes, and the fact of game script because their defense is so good. But I don't think Patrick Mahomes, and this is crazy to say, but the numbers are the numbers. I don't think Patrick Mahomes is an automatic every week starter. And honestly, he hasn't been for some time. It's just because he's Patrick Mahomes in capital letters. We've just sort of been like, well, it's the Chiefs and Reed and Mahomes, and he just fantasy-wise, he has not been great.
You're closing it out this week.
I am 100%. Sorry, I forgot the premise of the bet. Yeah, I'm closing it out this week. Yeah. I got my soapbox here.
You got to hit us with the facts first.
Yeah, sorry.
Matthew.
I'm closing it out on Patrick Mahomes this week. Yes, I am, and I don't think he is a automatic no-brainer start, obviously, going forward. I think it's matchup dependent.
Yeah, when you look at guys just around the league and more consistent offenses like a Brock Purdy, like a Baker Mayfield, a Geno Smith, all of those offenses right now are humming, but those aren't guys coming into the season that you would start over. Sam Darnold, that's one way from left field because he wasn't even supposed to be the starter. But now those guys are playing more consistently at this point than Patrick Mahomes. And like you said, it's the defense. If you look at this game, I'll talk about just this specific matchup. The Chiefs are they're minus 5 points in this game. They 5-point favorites, right? And we have and it's because of that defense, right? But you look at the Saints on the other side. They have 6 interceptions this season. That's second in the league. And just from a matchup standpoint, these Saints corners match up well against what the Chiefs are going to have to put out there at wide receiver. The Saints may have the best cornerback trio amongst one of the best cornerback trios in the league. So when you're telling me you get Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo going against Justin Watson, Mecole Hardman, I would take the bet on the Saints there. So I'm going to close it out as well. I got him ranked quarterback 16 because he's quarterback 17 in fantasy points per game.
Yeah. I'm at QB 15 this week, but you and I are both on the same page there. Even in a week in which there are 4 teams on a bye, Mahomes is merely a mid-tier QB2, and it doesn't feel like that's going to get better anytime soon unless we get more news on Rashee Rice and that he's coming back and that the injury isn't as serious here. I'm going to also deviate real quickly on Rashee Rice, just as long as we're talking Chiefs and talking Mahomes. I got a lot of questions about Rashee Rice yesterday, just text, DMs, tweets, everything like that. And there are 2 schools of thought here. So, he had the MRI on Monday, and we have not heard, it was a torn ACL, he's out for the year. So that's great. The fact that at least the initial tests, they didn't immediately rule him out. So, hopefully what we're all hoping for is that the injury was not as serious and that we might see Rashee Rice again sometime this season. Like, we're still waiting for more news. There is a sinister conspiracy theory out there.
Yeah.
I have no proof of this. I want to be very clear about that. I have absolutely no proof at all. This is what people are saying. Some people are throwing this out there. That because Rashee Rice has this off the field issue, and I'm also, by the way, this is me treading into territory that I'm not 100% sure of, but I believe that you have to be eligible to play in a game for a suspension to work, in essence, meaning like if he was ruled out for the entire year, they couldn't suspend him.
Yeah,
I think that's right.
It would kick down the road.
Right, kick down the road. So the thought process there is that because he's dealing with this off-the-field issue and that there's a chance that he might be suspended, if you're Rashee Rice, do you say, hey, I'm not, quote, out for the year? You settle that out. You figure that out off the field. You settle that case off the field. You take whatever suspension the NFL will hand down. You handle it this year while you, in theory, quote unquote, can't play, but you're eligible, whatever. You're not on any IR. And then next year, you're 100%. Again, I have absolutely no proof. Zero proof at all. I'm not even making that accusation. I'm just saying that is, if you're into conspiracy theories, that is out there.
Yeah.
So a lot of people make accusations about, the Chiefs and how just certain things go in games, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Bottom line is it's too early to drop Rashee Rice, if that's what you're wondering.
Yeah.
It's
way cannot drop him.
Don't drop him. Wait till we see how it is. And again, so yeah, we'll see how that all plays out. But I have Rashee Rice in the League of Assholes, and I am not dropping him, although he is on my bench in my matchup this week against Lawrence, which is upsetting.
Lawrence, we move to
I could use him against you.
We move to the running backs. Rhamondre Stevenson, back-to-back games with single-digit fantasy points after the hot start. Where does he rank for you this week, and is he a keep it open in a game where the Patriots are favored against the Dolphins?
Yeah, the Patriots should be favored against the Dolphins.
From what we've seen of the Dolphins.
Yeah, right. I got him at running back 19 this week. I'm going to keep it open. Now, like you said, the hot start, he's running back 25 this season, but the last two games he's been running back 55, and Antonio Gibson's been running back 38 in that span. All you have to do is go back and look 1 week back and look what the Titans did against the Dolphins defense. Like, they made it their business to run. They ran it 37 times. Like, Tajay Spears, the backup running back, took 15 carries. They just kept going at it, and sooner or later you saw Tony Pollard start breaking those runs. Then you look at this over-under, it's 35.5. That's the lowest in week 5, so they're not expecting a lot of points. You're going to expect the Dolphins to try to get their playmakers the ball at the line of scrimmage. The Patriots will do the same thing as well, so they might get Gibson involved as well, but this is definitely a spot where Rhamondre Stevenson could bounce back.
I'm keeping it open as well, Lawrence. You like the matchup against the Miami Dolphins. No team in the NFL has given up more rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs than the Miami Dolphins. And so, Rhamondre Stevenson, who in the two games that weren't blowouts for the Patriots, weeks 1 and 2, he got at least 20 touches in both those games. And so in this game, where the Patriots, believe it or not, are actually favored at the moment. They're 1-point favorites against the Dolphins. We certainly don't expect the Dolphins to come in there and blow out the Patriots, the game's in Miami. But we don't expect the Dolphins to come into this game and blow out the Patriots. So in a close game, we expect a heavy workload for Rhamondre Stevenson. He's a top 20 play from this week. I'm keeping it open. Patriots offensive line beat up, but still the volume of work plus his involvement in the passing game, at least a 13% target share in 3 out of 4 games this year for Rhamondre Stevenson. I have been running back 18 in my initial ranks.
Our other running back today, Matthew, Rachaad White. He's got the Falcons. Right now, he's RB 35 in points per game this season, which, based on where you drafted him, that's disappointing.
For sure, and Bucky Irving has looked to the eye test.
He's better.
He's the better running back, and by the way, he's been the more productive fantasy running back. But I am, unfortunately, reluctantly keeping it open. And it's because, honestly, look, I'm at running back 26, so I'm not expecting great things. But we've got 4 teams on a bye this week. And so given just how the lack of depth at the running back position to begin with, and now you got 4 teams out, and that includes, no Dave Montgomery this week, no Jahmyr Gibbs, no Saquon Barkley. We've got some big names that aren't playing this week. Not to mention sort of the injuries. We don't know if Austin Eckler's coming back. We know Isaiah Pacheco's not playing, et cetera, et cetera. As a result, I do have to keep it open, again, reluctantly. 12 or fewer touches in 3 straight games. It's a tough matchup against the Falcons, right? They're top 10 in terms of fewest fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs. But if there's a positive here, he is a running back. He will get double-digit touches. And the Falcons do allow the 6th most receptions to opposing running backs. So given how well the Buccaneers offense overall is playing these days, that you're hoping he gets, he continues to have involvement in the passing game. Running back 26. He is a reluctant keep it open, a reluctant flex, Lawrence.
Yeah, that number that you just mentioned about the Falcons allowing the 6th most receptions to running backs, I'll keep it open because he's still getting the 4 targets per game. And we just saw a graphic there that showed that White plays 63% of the snaps to Bucky Irvin's 37. But Bucky's gaining on him. Last game, that got closer to 48% and 44% as far as the touches go. Rachaad White, running back 29 this season. Bucky Irvin, running back 33 on a lot less touches. So because Rachaad White is still getting more of the receiving work, plus the fact that you may be out of Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs, and some other guys, even J.K. Dobbins, that's a guy I would start over Rachaad White weekly at this point. This is why you had to keep it open for this particular week. That could change going forward.
I agree with you guys, though, with the premise that the clock is ticking, right? We're doing this segment with the idea of this week, which means you can play Rachaad White. We can't say that for the rest of the season with Bucky Irving. He's just a much more creative runner. Oh, yeah. He's more creative after the catch than Rachaad White. And here's where some of the change is coming right now. Bucky Irving, for the first time this season, got the red zone work this week as well. Mm-hmm. So you're really starting to see it slowly migrate, but it's just not all the way there yet.
Yeah. That's the thing. But, it would be a surprise to me. It would be a surprise to me if over the second half of the year, Bucky Irving is not the lead running back for the Buccaneers. Yeah. It just feels like, he's getting more comfortable. They're trusting him more in pass pro. Baker's getting more used to him as well. So, again, at some point, if you're Todd Bowles and the staff, you're just like, this guy's better. He's been their leading rusher in every game this year, despite getting less touches and less snaps. Rachaad White is what? He's averaging 2.1 yards per carry. Yeah. Again.
That's a couple of walking steps, right?
Yeah. Rachaad White is 6 foot. Yeah. He's averaging 2.1 yards per carry. If he put a football on his head and literally just fell forward, he would gain more yardage than if he actually tried to run.
And it really was a thing for him last year was volume, because he didn't average more than 4 yards a carry last year. But now that volume is being taken away.
Correct.
So that kind of takes away from his overall fantasy value. But for this week, you can't imagine, you have a good-ass running back roster if you benching Rachaad White this week with the buys.
Tony Pollard's out, J.K. Dobbins is out this week.
It's a lot of guys.
It's a lot of guys, unfortunately.
All right, as we go to the pass catchers, our first one is Jaylen Waddle against New England. Here's the reality with Jaylen Waddle right now. He hasn't scored double-digit fantasy points since week 1, and it's getting way worse as the weeks go on as the Dolphins' offense sinks without Tua.
Over his last 2 weeks, without Tua Tagovailoa, to your point, he's got 62 total yards. He's averaging 7.1 fantasy points per game. He is wide receiver 71. There are 70 wide receivers. There are 70 wide receivers with a higher points per game average over the last 2 games than Jaylen Waddle without Tua Tagovailoa. If you guys want to start wide receiver 71, you knock yourselves out. I ranked it at wide receiver 46. I thought that was generous. Again, he's always got that big play ability, but the Dolphins have the second lowest implied team total in Week 5. You mentioned it. We talked about this early in the show. Over/under of 35. We don't expect a lot of scoring in this game. They've gotten 0 deep targets, as you see the next-gen stats and just his route tree for Jaylen Waddle. There's nothing deep here. He's got a 4.4 average depth of target, 0 deep targets, as you see there, right? 4 receptions on 6 targets, just 36 yards, 25 of those after the catch. So what little yardage he is getting after the catch, but they're dumping it off. Maybe they try to open it up a little bit more for Tyler Huntley in the second week of him in the offense. He just got there. I get that, but in an ideal world, you're not starting Jaylen Waddle until we see some production from until Tua's back or we see some production from whoever the Miami quarterback is.
The thing about this is at least Tyreek Hill got some attempts at some deep shots last game. Like Snoop threw it out there a couple of times, missed them, right? Jaylen Waddle's not getting any of that.
No.
Like they're saying, Jaylen, you got to take that thing and go to the house. And Matthew, you talk about his wide receiver 70 ranking the last 2 games. Well, for the year, he's wide receiver 57. He's behind Cooper Kupp, and how many games he done missed, right? He started out with a bang, both of them did, but that was with Tua. He had 109 receiving yards in week 1. Since then, he had 103 receiving yards the past 3 games. So, like, I do think the Dolphins will try to open it up more with Huntley. That's a tough offense to run when you've been there 2 weeks, but there's no way you go. I just talked about the game being 35.5 over under. There's no way you go out there this week, start Jaylen Waddle knowing all of these things. So I'm going to keep it close, and I'm a little more generous than you ranking him wide receiver 42.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, wow, you love Jaylen Waddle.
I guess I do.
He's player of the week. All right, so Zay Flowers still has his franchise quarterback, but the problem is for Zay Flowers, a little similar to Waddle, Lawrence, that the production hasn't been there the last couple weeks. Do you still ride with him hoping that he could turn it around? The Ravens' script, obviously, has been very run-heavy.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's week 3 versus Dallas. They laid the smackdown on them. They ain't had to throw. Last week, they laid the smackdown on the Bills. Derrick Henry laid the smackdown on the Bills, so they didn't have to throw. So the actual throwing has been good. It just hasn't been a lot of it. But when you look at the first 2 games for Zay Flowers, he saw 21 targets. He's only had 6 the past 2 games. When you look at him versus this Bengals defense coming up, we saw Terry McLaurin. He got back on track against the Bengals. You saw them versus the Jaguars. Their receivers was able to do their thing against the Bengals. So if the Bengals could just keep this a game, and offensively the Bengals will be good enough to do that, you hope, then that should make Zay Flowers more fantasy valuable. So I will leave this open for him. I got him at wide receiver 22 in week 5.
I'm at 21, as you just saw, so we're right there, Lawrence. I will also keep it open, and you're absolutely right. The key here is, can the Bengals keep this close enough? The last two games, Zay Flowers, 30 combined receiving yards, averaging under 4 fantasy points per game. But in both those games, the Ravens were up 21-3 in the second quarter. Both those games, they were blowouts, right? And so if the Bengals can keep this close, we expect Zay Flowers to be a much bigger part of this offense. Team high 26% target share. In the 2 competitive games that the Ravens played, he had double-digit targets. He had at least 10 targets in both those games as well. To your point about Terry McLaurin getting right against the Bengals, they've actually allowed the 12th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette had nice games against them last week in a game that the Bengals won. So, yeah, I'm keeping it open on Zay Flowers. He's my wide receiver 21 this week.
Our last wide receiver, Keenan Allen, he's got the Panthers in 2 games this season, Matthew. Keenan Allen is averaging under 6 points per game in a Bears passing offense that there's been volume at times, but it's been very inconsistent with the rookie quarterback and Shane Waldron.
Inconsistent is the nicest thing I've heard anyone say about the Bears offense so far this year. Dating back, first game back last week, 13.6% target share. So far this year, he's averaging just 3.4 yards per target, I should see. Carolina is actually pretty good against the slot. 5th fewest yards allowed to the slot, which is where Keenan Allen lines up. Until we see the Keenan Allen from last year, until we see consistency out of Caleb Williams, I'm closing it out. He's my wide receiver 48 this week as well. I mean, it's been tough. This Shane Waldron offense in Chicago has not taken flight the way I think the Bears hoped.
No, DJ Moore looks frustrated, and the numbers speak for themselves. Like we said, there's just no consistency. There's no flow of this. And Lawrence, some of the times we've seen the big numbers have been with them playing from significantly behind.
Yeah, that was the Bears versus the Colts. That's when Rhamondre Stevenson had his big game. They were trying to come back. But that's not how you want to play football, especially with a rookie. Think about this. DJ Moore is wide receiver 26. We might have him in this segment next week if things don't go right. And that's their top receiver. So there's no way I could start their number 2 or 3 receiver in Keenan Allen, who is wide receiver 72 in week 4. Great season last year, but this right now, the Bears offense hasn't figured out how they want everyone's role to be at in this offense. So I'm going to close it out on Keenan Allen.
One of the other challenges here, it's sort of the same as we talked about with the Chiefs, obviously in a different way, Mahomes versus Williams, but the fact is the Bears defense is really good. They're not getting into shootouts. They don't need
They don't want them.
They don't need Caleb Williams to suddenly go crazy in the passing because they don't need to. They want to play more controlled. We like Carolina's offense under Andy Dalton, but this game's in Chicago. We don't think the Panthers are going to come in and light up the Bears. Certainly this should be a low-scoring, close game. They got the running game going last week, right? DeAndre Swift. And so I think if I'm Shane Waldron, you're just like, that's what we want to do is we want to try to run the ball, control the clock, not put as much on Caleb Williams' shoulders. And if you're not putting as much on Caleb Williams' shoulders, it's hard to see how that pass distribution goes between DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, who's come on a little bit, and Keenan Allen. So, yeah, we're closing it out on Keenan Allen. As long as we're talking Bears here, Connor, I'm curious. Hindsight's 20/20, easy to say, and obviously I'm sitting here on found money. I'm playing with a house money here. But as we sit here in going into Week 5, should the Bears have taken Jayden Daniels instead of Caleb Williams, or is it too soon to say that?
I still think it's too soon.
Because that's the hot take artist.
The combo has started. The combo has absolutely started. I think, number one, the Bears' offensive line has been dreadful. And I thought the Commanders' offensive line would struggle. Credit to them. They haven't. They've been fine. Jayden Daniels deserves his flowers. He's been amazing. I think it's a little early.
Right.
But there's a lot of takes out there right now.
I do know.
A lot of hot takes.
I do know some people that pre-draft was saying the Bears should take him, but I still think it was it was the right move to take Caleb Williams. But I'll say this. You just mentioned their line. We just talk about the Bears' offense. Those are two things that have been there when Justin Fields was on the Bears. And now you see Justin Fields throwing for 300 and running for 55 in the same games.
He's the
winning the division.
He's the quarterback of a 3-1 team.
Right.
That too, which is
That's
a
got
big
a legit
thing
shot
for
at
him.
going 4-1 on Sunday Night Football in Pittsburgh when the Cowboys take. Which, by the way, we'll talk about this later, but we're going to be in Pittsburgh this Sunday morning at Applebee's. There's an Applebee's in Pittsburgh. We'll talk about that in a minute here. But just as I'm talking about it here, like if you're in Pittsburgh or the Pittsburgh area or Pennsylvania, honestly, even if you're across the country, fine. It's
pull
that
up,
kind of
pull
importance.
up, pull up.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be there live broadcasting from an Applebee's Sunday morning fantasy football pregame. Come dress as me or come dress as Lawrence. Honestly,
somebody did come dressed as you last year.
Yeah, I know.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, he ate for free.
He did eat for free.
Yeah, it's a good move
if you
by
come
him.
dressed as any one of us, you come dressed as Jay Croucher. Yeah, 1,000%.
You eat for free.
You eat for free.
And you'll probably appear on the show
Yeah,
if you
honestly,
want to.
what do you think of Jay Croucher costume? Is it just like a
Well,
New
now
York?
we nailed it.
Well, I know. It's like
It's the downtown Fide-Eye uniform.
Yeah, exactly.
The
That's true.
pressed new button down, the slacks.
Yeah, or is it just like is
Liberty
it like New
hoodie?
York Liberty
New York
jersey, New York Liberty jersey, and like a
Right now is a good time to wear that.
Just
Right.
multiple betting apps that you're just
That's
juggling.
true.
Yeah,
That's true. You're logged in on 30 different betting apps.
yeah, exactly.
That's
I mean,
fair.
I'm sorry, only on DraftKings. He only bets on DraftKings.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
right. All right. Our last player I would call Mr. Keep It Open or Close It Out. I swear he's on this segment multiple times every year. Kyle Pitts. Here, Matthew. Kyle Pitts right now has one game this season with more than 26 yards. That's not an exaggeration. One game.
He's been under 30 receiving yards in 3 out of 4 games this season. Like, he caught a touchdown in week 1, but that was a busted coverage where he was just wide open, where any of the 3 of us would have caught that touchdown. Again, just with that busted coverage, right? His snap rate has decreased in every game this season. He's got only one game with more than 4 targets. He's averaging 3.8 per game. He's averaging just over 6 fantasy points per game. You see it there on your screen. Not only am I closing it out, Connor,
Drop City.
He's Drop City.
Oh.
Welcome to Dumpsville, Population U. Right? It's the old Simpsons line. Welcome to Dumpsville, Population U. I don't know that it's Kyle Pitts' fault. I don't know what the issue is. But the one thing I will say is that yes.
Can you believe it?
Hey, yeah, Arthur Smith. Yeah, let's
You
go,
know
Arthur
what?
Smith.
You
Get a
brought
free
up
drink.
Justin Fields having success.
Justin Fields having success, maybe, like we, and by we, I really mean me, torched Arthur Smith all last year.
right.
Torched him.
Yeah.
And, by the way, still probably should have. But, but honestly, you sit here and you see another game this past week where Tyler Algier out-touches Bijan Robinson. Kyle Pitts can't get on the field, can't get a target from a new quarterback, from a new offensive coordinator. Maybe it wasn't Arthur Smith. Maybe it's Kyle Pitts, Connor. Maybe it's.
No. At some point, it's an indictment on the player.
Targets are earned. Targets have to be earned.
Look at Ray McLeod.
Look at Ray McLeod.
Speaking of targets,
look at Darnell Mooney.
I don't love the target share here throughout the season. It's 12.5% for Kyle Pitts, and this was a guy that was supposed to be, as the fantasy folks say, unlocked by Kirk Cousins in this Zach Robinson offense. Then you just think about, they're not throwing the ball enough either for him to be you're fourth on the pecking order. You're fifth on the pecking order because you're behind the running back too and Ray McLeod, right? Kirk Cousins is averaging under 30 passing attempts per game, so the first guy we're going to is Drake London, and he himself is wide receiver 21. So there's no way you could play a guy who has 8 receptions, 15 targets, and 105 yards and a touchdown. That's good
and
for one game.
Right.
If he give me that in one game, we back, baby.
Not 1 month.
But not 1
month. I can't do it.
You're the biggest Falcons fan I know. If Kyle Pitts was on the waiver wire in a normal-sized league, are you picking him up?
Am I picking him up? Nah. I'll give you a real situation because we play each other, and he's my tight end.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the waiver wire right now, just being which one of these dudes can give me 4 points? All I need is 4 or 5 points.
It's me and you
because
this Sunday.
It's
2 catches for 20 yards.
The week before that, when Kyle Pitts caught that 50-yard play, and everybody oh, snap. Then he ain't do nothing else. No. So, if he could just give me that one catch, I'll take that but we shouldn't be thinking like that. We shouldn't be hoping for 130-yard reception for Kyle Pitts, and that's the point of this segment, and that's why we closing it out.
Yeah.
It's my tight end 16.
And you're going to have to make a decision on that by Thursday night because the Falcons play Tampa Bay.
And look, if he does do well, I'm not going to be beating my chest. It's going to be whew, man, man, I'm lucky to get them 7
Got through
points.
1 more week. All right, let's recap Matthew's Keep It Open, Close It Out rankings. Patrick Mahomes, yes, Patrick Mahomes at QB 15 is a close this week. Rhamondre Stevenson, Keep It Open, RB 18 against the Dolphins. Patriots are favored for the first time this season. Rachaad White against the Falcons, RB 26, reluctantly open. Jaylen Waddle, wide receiver 46, close that out. Zay Flowers against the Bengals, wide receiver 21. Keep it open on Zay Flowers. Keenan Allen against the Panthers, he's wide receiver 48. Close that. Kyle Pitts, what combo do we need to have left? Tight end 17, a surefire close for this week. Let's go to the Rotoworld Player news. And we start off with a banger here, guys. Something that you can kind of feel coming, going all the way back to August, but now it's official with the problems the Raiders have had. Davante Adams clearly wants out. Per Adam Schefter, the Raiders would consider trading him, of course. We also heard from Schefter today, Davante Adams prefers a quarterback he's played with, which means literally the Jets and the Saints.
Yep.
There's some other teams rumored to be interested out there. Matthew, what do we want for Davante Adams in fantasy, though, I think is how we look at this? Because it's been rough this year in the Raiders, so this only has to improve, in theory?
I think you would want, for fantasy, I think you'd want Rodgers or Carr.
Yeah,
both the Saints offense has been really good for much of the year. The Jets offense has shown some flashes. They could certainly use them. Just the familiarity between Rodgers and Davante Adams, and then if you're a defensive coordinator, all due respect to Mike Williams and Al Lazard, but if you're a defensive coordinator and you're like, I got Garrett Wilson on one side and Davante Adams on another, and oh, by the way, Breece Hall's a threat underneath, pick your poison, right? And so I feel like that would open up a lot of stuff for the Jets offensively. Look, might be fun to have him on the Commanders.
I think it would be a lot of fun to have him on the Commanders.
Fantasy-wise, Pittsburgh's been rumored as well. They were in on Brandon Ayuk until the very end. That didn't end up happening. But I think fantasy-wise, we wouldn't like that. We wouldn't want him to go to Pittsburgh. I think that's what you're hoping for with Davante Adams. Is you want an offense. You want an offense where there are targets available. It's a pass-first offense, and it's a solid quarterback. It's an above-average quarterback. Yeah. That's what you're hoping for.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback off you're being realistic. You're not mentioning the Chiefs and the Bills, the Bills would make a ton of sense, but we haven't heard any rumors of that.
Like, come on, man.
Bad
I
blood
think
there.
we just wasting.
I think that was
like,
one of the Schefter tweets was that he said the Chiefs are not currently in consideration, not among
it
the
sounds
teams.
great. Receiver is definitely a need for them.
Sure.
But it's gonna be if they're gonna get a receiver, it's gonna be from elsewhere. Not we've seen in division trades like the Commanders trading
Jahan Dotson.
but that's different. That's like we good. We don't. This just a throwaway. Davante Adams is not a throwaway. He's a top 5 receiver in the league. So that's not gonna happen. But I will say this: if he were to go to a team like the Commanders or even the Pittsburgh Steelers, that would, from a fantasy perspective, that would help the quarterback more so than it helps the receiver. So if you have a Justin Fields or a Jayden Daniels, that helps them more, although I don't know if Jayden Daniels needs
I will
much
say
more
this.
help.
I think, honestly, for fantasy, what we're really rooting for is just a trade. Just period.
Yeah.
Just
And
get
it's
him
gonna
out of
happen.
here.
It's gonna happen.
Because it's clearly like going back to Jimmy Garoppolo last year and just like it hasn't seemed like even towards the end of Derek Carr being there and they got rid of him, like it just hasn't felt great for Adams in Las Vegas for a couple of seasons now. And so I think a fresh start for Adams and for the team just would be good for both players. So I mean, he's not going to go to a worse quarterback situation than Gardner Minshew, you know, and he's hard. It's hard to see him going to a situation where he has more target competition than he did with Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. I mean, he's still Davante Adams. He's always going to demand targets wherever he goes. So I think just any trade would be good for his fantasy value, and certainly should he get dealt, like, you know, see if he's still. I haven't looked at what his roster percentage is, but last week, our own Denny Carter told you what the mainstream media wouldn't. Trey Tucker's a thing. And so we would expect a bigger role for Trey Tucker. He would be a nice preemptive pickup if after through waivers he's still out there in your league. I know he's a popular pickup this week. We talked about him on the waiver show yesterday, and obviously we talked about him last Friday with Denny. But Trey Tucker would get an up boost, and obviously Jacoby Myers as well. Jacoby Myers, you know, is probably out there in a few leagues as well. Probably like 80% rostered or something like that.
As we get closer to
Off the top of
Thursday,
my head.
as we get closer to Thursday Night Football, some injuries to keep an eye on. Mike Evans with knee and calf injuries was limited in practice on Tuesday. Bijan Robinson was limited in practice as well with a hamstring. As we know, Thursday Night Football, sometimes those guys need a rest on the Tuesday. So keep an eye on those. And then ones we'll be tracking all throughout the week. Anthony Richardson is going to be day-to-day right now with the oblique and abdominal injuries. So that could be a Joe Flacco game. We'll see. Jonathan Taylor with the ankle sprain that just nobody could figure out the definition of it at this
Mild
Because
high
it's- yeah,
ankle sprain. That makes
mild.
no sense.
Because if it's a high ankle, you'd think Jonathan Taylor's missing multiple weeks. But they're acting like he might be able to play this week, so we'll keep an eye on
Right.
it.
Which is, if he does, it's not a high ankle sprain.
There's just
Like,
no
can
way.
you run and cut?
Right.
Right. Joe Mixon still dealing with an ankle. Raheem Mostert has not been back from that chest injury, although he was a game-time decision last week for Monday Night Football. George Kittle with the rib injury. Trey McBride is still in concussion protocol, so we'll keep an eye on that one going throughout the week.
As is Austin Eckler. He's not on the screen, but he's also in the concussion protocol as well. And then all those tight end injuries,
Yep.
right? You know, Ingram and Njoku. You know, we're waiting to see on Malik Neighbors, of course, and we already talked about Rashee Rice.
Dominate this NFL season with a Fantasy Life Plus subscription. Get weekly rankings, start sit advice, DFS analysis, and betting tools. Use promo code SEASON20 for 20% off. Go to fantasylife.com/rotoworld to learn more. We're taking our first break. When we're back, we'll debate if we're taking any wide receiver over Nico Collins if we drafted today. Who's eating good? Coming right up.
Our Halloween costume for this year. That's pretty good. Good luck being that suave and debonair.
Old but still has value.
You still got it.
Yeah.
You're an Adam Thielen.
There you go. That's the.
I
There
think
it
he pulled
is.
it off well.
Yeah.
Really
That's,
terrifying.
He got the
terrifying
fresh
stuff.
berry fade going
Yeah.
on.
That's Joe, and he. I gotta be honest. He's rocking it all. There he is. There. Look at him. What's up? Like seriously, which one is which?
I'm the real Matthew Berry.
More good times are in store when fantasy football pregame travels to Pittsburgh on Sunday. For those in the area, we're broadcasting live from the Applebee's at 6570 Steubenville Pike. Doors open at 10:30 a.m. and the show kicks off at 11. Join us. We'll answer your sit-start questions and break down the biggest storylines of Week 5. If you're not in Pittsburgh, you can watch the show live on Peacock and, of course, at YouTube NFL on NBC.
If you come by, Lawrence will give you his phone number, so you can text him 24/7.
Whether it's real or not, we can't confirm
No,
that.
Right. That's
you'll
the
be
thing.
able to text him
A
any
phone
kind of
number.
fantasy question you have, whatever you
I'll
want.
give you a number.
He'll play Scramble in his contacts and give you a random number. See what you
there
get.
you go.
You might get Jay Croucher.
You might.
Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you get Jay Croucher. Maybe we'll give you Big Show's number.
Maybe. You get all the research you
Yeah, all
got.
the
want.
research you ever want.
Nah, if they
you
come
just
to
text
me,
research. Hey,
they come for me for a number, I'm giving them your number, Barry. I'm going to
my
hook them up.
unlisted. Do you have my number? I'm not convinced.
Hey, well, you better be, because I do.
I gotta get that locked down better.
Served by Applebee's. We're starting with Nico Collins. He's got the Bills. I mean, I want to ask you this, Matthew. If you were drafting today, how many wide receivers are you taking ahead of Nico Collins right now?
CeeDee Lamb, my guy 8.
Justin Jefferson?
Justin Jefferson.
Okay.
That's about it.
Yeah, I agree.
That's about it. Like, could you make a Jamar Chase argument? Sure. Could you make an Amon-Ra St. Brown argument? Sure. Could you make a Malik Neighbors argument? Sure.
That's an interesting one.
But I think for me, I think it's 3 because Neighbors, you're still dealing with the quarterback issues. Amon-Ra, it's still a little bit more of a run-heavy offense. Jamar, it's close with Jamar.
Got T. Higgins.
It's right. It's just nervous a little bit about the hammy. I don't know. I think it's probably Nico would be 3 for me as well. The concern with Nico in the preseason was merely just, is he going to get the kind of targets because they have Tank Dell and they have Stephon Diggs? Well, Tank Dell's been out the last game and a half, but still, Nico Collins leads the NFL in receiving yards this season. He had 15 targets last week. He's got a 29% target share on the Texans. He's second in the NFL with 7 end zone targets. Again, he's got an elite quarterback that looks for him early and often, especially in the red zone and the green zone as well. He's currently the second best wide receiver in fantasy. As we take a look at our fantasy points per game versus their preseason ADP. And a lot of values here, Connor and Lawrence, right? Malik Neighbors goes off he was ranked at wide receiver 24. He's currently the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy. Nico, he was ranked wide receiver 16. He's number 2. Jefferson was wide receiver 4. I got a lot of grief for that wide receiver 4.
He's living up to it.
And he's living up to it as well. My little Cooper Kupp, 14-4, which is crazy when you think about the fact that, he's been banged up. Jayden Reed. How great has Jayden Reed been? I don't think people realize just how good he's been, especially with Jordan Love. Chris Godwin at 37. Juwan Jennings. Yeah, whatever. That's the one big game. That'll come down as the season goes on. DK Metcalf, he's wide receiver 17. He's in there at 8. Amon-Ra, wide receiver 5. He's wide receiver 9. That's fine. How about Stephon Diggs? How about this Texans offense having 2 guys in the top 10?
And Tank Dell's injury
And
has
Tank Dell's
lifted
injury
up.
has opened up.
Right. That's the key
But I
here.
think some of the questions were, is Diggs washed? And clearly,
he still got it.
He has not
He
been.
ain't.
But
No.
But my point is that I think that if I sat here and if you just went to like some other bar that wasn't the fantasy football happy hour bar and said, hey, who do you think the best wide receivers in the NFL are? Justin Jefferson comes up, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, maybe A.J. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown is starting to get more national pub. Somebody might mention Cooper Kupp.
You're talking about just best receiver.
Best receiver in the NFL. You're just
Tyreek would still come up.
Oh, yeah, Tyreek, absolutely. Tyreek would come up 100%. Tyreek would
Some
be
people
there.
would still say Davante Adams.
Some
despite
people might
the
say
quarterback problems.
people would probably say Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson, maybe Chris. Like people aren't talking about Nico Collins in the vein of Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, and he's that guy. He's right there in that league.
Yeah, wide receiver 2 in fantasy, but he's going to be wide receiver 1 for me this week.
Oh man!
Against this Bills defense here, 3 out of 4 games, double-digit targets. 3 out of 4 games, at least 115 receiving yards. He's getting 7.5 catches per game, which is clearly more than enough for him to do what he has to do. Like you said, he gets some of those targets are in the red zone. He could kill you at each part of the field, no matter where it is, but that deep ball is where he comes through for C.J. Stroud.
He was not a guy that was like an elite prospect coming out of college, but it's been slow developing here for Nico.
It has, but he's become a better route runner. He's a big-bodied player, so he can play on the outside, and he has a great quarterback that throws in rhythm and timing. When a big wide receiver is in contested situations, that's what you want. So this has just been a blend of it's perfect for Nico Collins and C.J. Stroud. But credit to him, he's always been a good player. He's turned himself into a truly great player.
Yeah, he's worked hard, and it's paying off in a big way. So it's great to see for Nico Collins, who again isn't a nationwide household name when it comes to elite wide receivers, but He is, and should be valued as such both in fantasy and real life.
Matthew, you mentioned Jayden Reed.
Yeah.
He's got the Rams this week. Lawrence, I'll throw this one at you. Is it time to sell high on Jayden Reed, or is this just the for real breakout in this offense for him?
I'm keeping him if you're telling me he's going to be with Jordan Love. I'm not selling anything. I'm taking advantage of where I was able to get him in the draft because he's he's a top 10 receiver in fantasy, and that's where I'll have him ranked this week. It's clear with Jordan Love in 2 games, caught 4 of 6 targets, 138 yards. Jordan Love comes back. He catches 7 of 8 targets for 139 yards and a touchdown. So with Jordan Love, he's the best receiver. Like we've all been trying to say, we've been trying to figure out who's the number 1 receiver, who the best receiver Green Bay. It's this young man, Jayden Reed. And now with Christian Watson out, that makes this even more important for him to take his game to even another level. The best thing about Jayden Reed too is he don't just do it in the receiving game. You could give him a reverse, a jet sweep. He could score from anywhere on the field. So I think that if you did get Jayden Reed, like you're living good. Like if you had a Jayden Reed and maybe Cooper Kupp, like you was able to, supplement that right there.
Right. That's one of the key points here is finding different ways to get the ball in Jayden Reed's hand. He's played 2 games with Jordan Love this year. He's averaging over 30 fantasy points per game. I mean, it's kind of number. He's finished as a top 2 wide receiver both weeks that Jordan Love played for the Packers. Obviously, Jordan Love is going to be under center this Sunday when they visit the Rams. The only thing that's slightly concerning, and I think this is more of an opportunity than a challenge, but so far he's got 0 end zone targets through 4 games. Like they're not looking for him when they get in close. It's Romeo Doubs, it's some Dontavian Wicks. Yeah. Those are the 2 guys that Jordan Love seems to look for the most when they get inside the 20, or even when they're looking into the end zone. That'll come. He's too good a wide receiver. He's been too involved in this offense. So the fact is that on the season he's wide receiver 10. Because it's small sample size and it's those 2 big huge games, but. And that's too high for me, but is he a legit top 20-ish wide receiver? 100%. He's very good. Love's very good. There's clearly a connection there. And to Lawrence's point, as long as Watson's out, he's going to be out there. He's their slot guy.
It was an uncharacteristic, brutal start to the season for Christian Kirk, but the last 2 weeks, Matthew, he's been himself again in this offense, and a guy that I would think is back on play as a weekly flex play.
Back-to-back games with at least 10 targets, back-to-back games with at least 7 receptions. It's a nice matchup against the Colts, to your point, Connor, as Indianapolis has allowed 5 different touchdowns to the slot that is tied for the 2nd most in the NFL. 37.5% target share last week, season high 5 deep targets. I feel like Christian Kirk always sort of kills the Colts too, by the way. It's just one of those things where it's just when you see the Colts on the schedule and you have Christian Kirk on your team, you're starting him. He's my wide receiver 28 this week. He's wide receiver 14 last week. He's very much a viable flex play against Indy.
Yeah, like you said, definitely like him in this matchup as the Colts are allowing the 11th most points in fantasy to receivers. What'll be interesting, though, going forward beyond this Colts game, because weeks 1 and 2, he was wide receiver.
Kenny Moore's been banged up. Just I should say, that's part of that.
And that's gonna be why he can have a good game. Weeks 1 and 2, Christian Kirk was wide receiver 97. The past couple of games, he's wide receiver. He's a top 15 receiver. It'll be interesting to see how it is when Evan Ingram comes back.
Yeah. Because
Evan Ingram played that first game. He got hurt, but it'll be interesting to see because Evan Ingram had 140 targets last season. So when Evan Ingram gets back, and then because Brian Thomas Jr., he's their best receiver.
Correct. He's the one that's going to earn the most targets. He's the real deal.
Like, that's the guy. And then so when Evan Ingram comes back, it's like, well, what do we do with a tight end who we targeted 140 times last year? And then you got Kirk. So going forward, we just have to see how he fits in there. But for this week against the Colts, like you said, Matthew, Christian Kirk, he gets busy versus them. So we like him this week. I got him at wide receiver 26.
Yeah, no, it was nice to see. Like, if there's one positive, it's been a disaster for Jacksonville, but if there's a couple positives here, it's that Brian Thomas is a real thing and is an every week starter. And also, they looked better last week. Yes, it was a loss. You don't love that. But at least they're trending in the right direction. This offense and Trevor Lawrence are trending in the right direction. And so hopefully they can get a win against Indianapolis and not go 0-5. That's, I think that after the first 2 weeks where you're like, oh, God, what do I do with Christian Kirk? Now you're like, okay, fine. All right, this is the guy, legit wide receiver 3. It's happy to see.
Fantasy football pregame starts your Sunday, and Cowboys-Steelers finishes it. Can Dak Prescott and the Cowboys upset TJ Watt and the Steelers as short road underdogs? Coverage of the battle begins at 7 p.m. on NBC and Peacock. And speaking of underdogs, we'll tell you if we're betting any this weekend. Early line alert coming up next for Last Call.
Very clever. Play on words. I caught it.
DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and use promo code BARRY when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. It's time for Last Call, which is early line alert every single Wednesday as we show you some of the totals going into Week 5. Jets-Vikings is the London game. By the way. That's at 40.5. Browns at Commanders.
Are you going to London to cover it?
I am not going to London.
Wow.
We are going to be in our lovely studio instead.
That's interesting.
But
feels like you should be there.
I feel like it should be there too.
Yeah.
It's a great experience. The London NFL games are
we
wild.
We got to talk to your agent about that.
Matthew, you got an early line you like this week?
None of the lines that really jump out to me as being absolutely great. I will say that Giants at Seahawks, 43.5, strikes me as a little bit low. This is assuming Malik Neighbors clears concussion protocol, but you think about the Giants coming off that Thursday night game. They've got 10 days to prepare. Seahawks defense traveling back home on a short week. They didn't look that impressive against the Lions, and so given how good the Seahawks offense is against the Giants offense getting close to competent, give me the over on 43.5. Giants with 10 days to prepare for their trip to Seattle.
I'm looking at Colts-Jaguars. I like the Colts to cover the 2.5 points that they're getting. And I know this is kind of a up-in-the-air line because we don't know if Anthony Richardson's going to play or if it's going to be
Shane
Joe Flacco.
Steichen during the commercial break said that he might practice today.
Richardson. Okay. So, either way, I trust Joe Flacco if it's not Richardson. I'm going to take the Colts getting some points. What about you, Lawrence?
I like them on the money line. I think the Colts are a better team than what people think, and they'll show that on the road versus the Jaguars.
Yeah, I trust the coaching.
Time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here for Lawrence and Connor. Pittsburgh, we need you to show up. Roll up.
Pittsburgh.
Dress up.
Dress up. We'll
Eat
see
free.
you there. All right, man. We'll see you tomorrow as well. Love Hate Day tomorrow. Rankings are up live on Rotoworld.com. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com. And I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched. Or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.